Hello. So one of the challenges for the research paper proposal and the upcoming research paper assignment is going to be finding scholarly peer-reviewed sources. So in this week's video, I'm going to mention a few databases that I think will be especially helpful for students in English 1002, and I will show you a quick demo of searching 3 example databases. So let's go. The first place I'm stopping is on Jacobs Library's homepage, and I'm going to click on Research and then click on the A to Z database list. So as you've heard about in your readings and in previous videos, you will need to find some scholarly sources for the research paper proposal and for the assignment itself. Now, you can use the source search function to search every single holding that we have at Jacobs Library. But in this video, I'm going to point out 3 particular databases that I think will be the most useful and show you how to use them. Now, any one of these databases that you see on this list are going to function in a similar way. So the different screens for each database that you'll see might look somewhat different, but the principles behind how to use them are going to be the same in each one. So even if you end up looking at a database that I didn't show you today, you can still rely on the research principles and ideas that I'm showing you here. So the first thing I'll point out on this A to Z database list is that IVCC has access to 71 databases. And again, the purpose of a database is to search multiple journals at once. So instead of having to go through and search individual journals for your particular author, which might take forever, what a database does is it searches multiple journals for you and returns all the results at once. Now, one of the first databases that I think students will find helpful for this project is called JSTOR. So you can either scroll through the list or click on J. Here you will find JSTOR. Notice too that each database includes a brief description underneath it that tells you what it searches and what kinds of results you're going to find. So as you're scrolling through that A to Z database list, I encourage you to take a few minutes, look at each of the databases and their descriptors and decide which ones might be relevant to your particular project. And keep in mind, you can use these databases for other classes as well. Right now, let's take a look at JSTOR. So as the JSTOR description says, it's going to search scholarly journals, literary journals, research reports, ebooks, and primary sources. So it casts a really wide net. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I am going to use the author Edgar Allan Poe, who I happen to love. I have a picture of him back right there on my shelf, if you can see that. But instead of using one of his better known stories, I'm going to use a short story he wrote called The Gold Bug, which not many people have read and is really fabulous. So I'm going to start out the same way I imagine many students do, which is by just typing in my author's name. So let's point out one thing right off the bat. You may be shocked by how often students misspell their own author's name. So the first thing I want to do is encourage you to be sure that you are spelling your author's name correctly. For example, Edgar Allan Poe spells Allan with an A. Most people spell it with an E and try to search it that way. You're not going to get the best results if you misspell your author's name. So let's just try Edgar Allan Poe and see how many results we get. Whoa! We have received 4,553 results. That's far too many. We could never hope to go through all of these results. So what I'm going to do is, I could do it right from here, jump into the advanced search. I think we need to get a little more specific with what we're looking for. So I'm going to try my first keyword, again, as the writer's name. But this time I'm going to go ahead and add the name of the story that I'm using as well and see if that narrows things down. So already we can see that we have narrowed down quite a bit from thousands and thousands of sources to 296 results. That's still a lot to go through, but it seems a lot more manageable than the results that we had first off. And I could even refine my results even further over here. So if I wanted to look only at journals or book chapters, maybe I only wanted to look at more recent publications for some reason, I could go ahead and refine my search that way. I want to try one more thing and see if that helps refine my results even further. So instead of simply putting gold bug in, I'm going to put gold bug in quotation marks, because remember, that's telling my search engine that I only want to see results that contain those words next to each other in that order. Now we've again cut our results in half. So we went from thousands to a couple hundred to just over 100. Now, again, I can refine even further. Maybe I'm only interested in reading sources from journals. Okay, well, now I've got something to work with, right? Now, let's imagine that we are interested in this first source right here. So we're going to go ahead and click on the title and get a little bit of a closer look at what this source is all about. Now, some sources are going to offer you an abstract, right? That little summary at the beginning that basically tells you what the article is going to tell you, right? It summarizes the whole thing. This particular database doesn't seem to include abstracts. So do notice I have a lot of citation information over here. But one thing that often these types of essays will do if they don't include an abstract is start off that introductory paragraph by previewing its main idea. The same thing that I ask you folks to do in your essays, right? I ask you to include a thesis statement that previews your main ideas. Most of these articles are going to do that as well. So as we see here, this article starts out by saying, no greater injustice can be done to the memory of Edgar Allan Poe than to acquit him wholly of the very vices that made his personality so fascinating and at the same time contributed so much to his genius. So it sounds to me like this writer is going to go on to argue that we need to represent Poe as he was, not a cleaned up, whitewashed version of his life, okay? Now, if I decide that this is a useful source for my project, the next thing I need to think about is how can I save this source so that I can get back to it? So we have a few options. First of all, I highly recommend when you find a source that you are going to use for your project, go ahead, jump into Noodle Tools and create a works cited entry for it right away. Number one, you're not going to lose that source. Number two, you can use Noodle Tools to build note cards around that source. And then number three, you always have the information to go back and find it in the first place. Let me give you a hint. You cannot always recreate a search the exact same way to come up with the same results. Databases get dozens, maybe hundreds of new articles added every week, every month, every year. So your same search terms might not yield the same search results. So it's very important when you find a source that you want to use, make sure that you capture it somehow. So you could share this. You might want to post it to Facebook or Twitter. Probably what would be more useful for most students would be to email it to yourself, right? You can create an account, log in, and save it to your JSTOR, account. Or this is what I would strongly recommend, is you can download a PDF version of the article. So here it will open as a PDF. I think this is a little friendlier in terms of reading and printing and citation anyway, right? Like when you need to find the page number, I think this is a little easier to read. And then from here, it's easy enough to download it directly to my computer and save it, or even print it off if I prefer to have a hard copy. But again, what I'm trying to emphasize to you is don't lose a good source once you have it, all right? So again, that's just a quick JSTOR demo. Let's take a look at another database that I think students might find useful, which is a database called Academic Search Complete. So you can see it over here listed as a popular database. It's also the second one on the list right here. And Academic Search Complete is a really great database to kind of start with because it houses an enormous collection of journals covering basically any subject you can think of. So if your teacher has assigned you some research in other courses and you're not sure what database might be a good one, I'm going to recommend Academic Search Complete. Now notice this screen looks quite different than JSTOR's, right? But again, these principles are going to be the same. So let me do the same thing I did. Let's just plug in a really basic search for Edgar Allan Poe. Something else that many databases point out, look over here underneath. It is suggesting searches for me. So if I were researching Edgar Allan Poe and the Raven, what everybody writes about, I could go ahead and click this and instantly get search results for that topic, but that's not what I'm looking for. So let's just start with this basic search for Edgar Allan Poe and see how many results we've come up with. Okay, 1,410 results. That seems like a lot. Let me show you another mistake I made. Let me head back to the original search screen. Now, when I was rehearsing this at home and demoing this at home, the first thing I did was I put in Edgar Allan Poe as the author, because I was thinking, oh, Edgar Allan Poe is an author, right? I should search for him as an author. But that's actually not correct. And many of you probably already know why. What happened is this database is searching for things that Edgar Allan Poe is the author of, not him as an author to be studied, but things that he wrote as an author. So I did not search for this correctly. I should be searching for him as a subject, right? Because I want articles that discuss him as a subject, not things that he necessarily wrote. So I could search for him as a subject. I'm going to go ahead and leave the fields blank. And instead of just searching for that basic Edgar Allan Poe search that gave me, 1,410 results, let me also add in gold bug in quotation marks. Again, telling my search engine I only want those words in that order next to each other. And let's search again and see what we come up with. So we jump from 1,410 results all the way down to 11, which seems much more manageable. Now, as I'm looking at this database, I need to remind myself that Nora is requiring scholarly sources, and perhaps not everything I find in this particular database is going to be scholarly. So again, no matter which database you're in, take a look around and see how you can narrow your results. So over here, you can see that I can narrow my results to, okay, I only want to see articles that are full text that I can actually read, and I only want the scholarly stuff. Boom. Now I have narrowed my results from 1,410 on Edgar Allan Poe to 5 simple scholarly results having to do with Edgar Allan Poe and his story, The Gold Bug. So, I like, let's say I'm writing a story about buried treasure, an essay about, the metaphorical meaning of a buried treasure, something like that. So I'm going to click on this article title here because it grabbed my eye. And notice that this piece does start with an abstract. So this is really useful for us because we can read this and immediately have a really good sense of, yes, this source might be useful for my project and I'm going to save it and read it later, or no, this isn't relevant and I need to keep researching. So definitely start by looking for the abstract. Notice too, again, some of the tools that each database will offer you. So over here, I can view this article as a PDF, as a full text. This is going to be a much printer friendlier version. And again, it's also going to provide those page numbers that I'm going to need when citing from this article in my citation. Back on the original page here. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see that this particular database offers even more tools than JSTOR did. So you have the option to send this article right to your own Google Drive. You could create an account and save it to your folder. You can print, you can email, you can save it to your computer. Let's check out their citation tools that they offer within here. So if I click Cite, notice though, there are many, many different types of citation formats. The first one that comes up is actually Brazilian National Standard. So that's interesting, but it's not the format, the documentation style that we use in English, right? So what we're going to have to do is scroll down until we find that MLA citation. Here's the one that we're looking for. And again, you might copy and paste this. If it were me, what I would probably do would be to just have Noodle Tools open in a separate tab and just jump back and forth and use this as my little cheat sheet for my Noodle Tools Works Cited. Now, one other element that I wanted to show you that might be really useful for some of you, let me get back into that article here, are the Library of Congress subject terms. So, one of the reasons that the field of library science exists, and one of the reasons that every librarian in Jacobs Library here at IVCC has at least a master's degree, is because the way that sources are sort of indexed in the system can be very complicated. Luckily for us lay people, we don't have to worry about the library science behind it. On our end, what we see are the results, which are subject terms that can lead us to more information about each topic. So notice, once I clicked into this particular author or article, I have a lot of links that I can explore further, right? So right here, I think we have a review, it doesn't want to open it in another tab for me, about the short story itself. Oh, it's just going to take me back to the results for that. If I want to read about Edgar Allan Poe, there's a subject heading right here that will take me to a bunch of results that have to do with Edgar Allan Poe. So sometimes the subject headings themselves can even offer you some more information. Let's say you wanted to write about the setting of the gold bug, which is the American South. And maybe there's something interesting in this history of South Carolina that you could read about, right? So sometimes your sources can actually leave you a trail of breadcrumbs to other interesting sources as well. So keep that in mind. So that's the academic search complete quick demonstration. The last one I wanted to show folks today, which is especially useful for when you're studying literature, is the Gale Virtual Reference Library. So as it tells you here, the Gale Virtual Reference Library is a popular resource for literary analysis, and it will look in books on health, medicine, business, travel, social sciences, literature, and more. Notice too, a really special facet of the Gale sources are that they do double duty. Number one, they are all scholarly. So anything you find in this Gale Virtual Reference Library resource is automatically considered scholarly, which is really fabulous. The second cool thing about the Gale Virtual Reference Library is that all of these resources that they search were originally published as books. You can see it says Gale eBooks right here. So what that means is that any source that you find within this database can count as a scholarly source or as a book source. They're all scholarly books, so you can use it as a scholarly or a book source, either way. Alrighty, so let's do what I've been doing with the other databases and just do an initial search for Edgar Allan Poe. Now again, notice I have several suggestions popping up that some writers might find helpful. For me, I don't think they're going to be helpful, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in his name. Okay, so again, right off the bat, we have what I would consider to be an overwhelming number of results. 732, I ain't got time to go through all that. So what I can do instead is search within these documents themselves. Now, I could just do an advanced search like I've done in the other search engines. That would work perfectly well. I just wanted to show you there's a little bit of a different way that Gale allows you to search. So within these results, notice over here how you filter. You can filter by subject, publication language, et cetera, et cetera. I want to go ahead and search within these results for gold bug. Now, did you see what happened over there on the left-hand side? I went from 700 odd results to 7 results. So again, we're looking at a much more manageable screen in front of us. Now, let me stop right here and mention something that some of you may be wondering. I'm using Edgar Allan Poe for my example, and he's been written about a lot. So I'm not really having a lot of trouble finding information about him. Some of you may have a writer who is not as well known and who doesn't have a wealth of scholarly work ready to be tapped into. For example, a student in my face-to-face morning class is writing about a poet named Rupi Kaur, K-A-U-R, who some of you may have heard of. But Ms. Kaur is a pretty new writer. She burst onto the scene like a few years ago. So there's not a lot of scholarly stuff written out there about her. However, Ms. Kaur's poetry often focuses on things like trauma. So what that writer might end up researching is trauma or poetry. Those are two things that they could research, and then they make the connections to Ms. Kaur's work. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, I'm having a lot of trouble finding information about my particular author, you could also be researching something related to that author. So if you're a student who's writing about Dave Pelzer's novel, A Child Called It, which centers on child abuse, and you're not able to find a lot of resources about that author, that's okay, because I'm not necessarily asking you to research the author for this essay. You certainly could, right? That's an option. But for those of you who are not finding a lot of information about your author, what you would probably want to do is research something that's related to their content, and then you'll make the connection to the author. So the student in my morning class might discover some interesting information about trauma and how our bodies react to trauma, and then connect that information to one of Rupi Kaur's poems about bursting into tears, right? Something like that. But if you're having trouble figuring out what to research for your particular project, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or the Writing Center or the library, and we'll be happy to talk you through it. Okay, back to the research. So I searched for Edgar Allan Poe, and then I searched within my results for the gold bug. Let's take a quick peek into this first result that I get here from a scholarly book called Gothic Literature, a Gale Critical Companion. Looks pretty cool to me. So again, I could easily just read and scroll through this whole page and see what I can find out. If I want to more quickly discover what this article has to say about my particular topic, I can use Control F on my keyboard and type in whatever words it is that I'm looking for in this particular document. So you can see here, when I typed in gold bug, it has highlighted for me over here where that appears in my article. So I can jump immediately down, and maybe that might give me a good sense of whether or not this article is going to be useful for me. So something that the Gale resources offer really in almost anyone that you look at is really excellent biographical information about the authors. You can see right here, it starts with a biography of Edgar Allan Poe. Now, some of you might be on the other side of that question that I asked before. It's not that you have a writer who's not well known and you're having trouble finding them. Maybe you have a writer who's super well known and you don't know where to start. So if you're not sure about how to write about or what to write about for essay 3, one approach could be really simple, and it's called biographical criticism. When we engage in biographical criticism, we basically learn about the author's life and times, the era that they lived in, and then we explore how the work that they produced shows the influence of the events of their life and the times that they lived in. So Edgar Allan Poe is a perfect example. Edgar Allan Poe is someone who had a lot of sadness and trauma and loss in his life. And if you read more about him or study him this semester, you will certainly learn all about that. And it's not difficult to see how that trauma and loss and sadness shows up in poems like Annabel Lee. So again, I'm just kind of throwing out some ideas for research as we jump through these databases. So biographical criticism could be a good option if you're feeling a little bit stuck on what to write about. So again, notice some more related subjects that the Gale Virtual Reference Library offers us. Maybe you're writing about horror stories or racism within horror stories, right? For your essay, we've got some subject headings right here that we could jump to find out some more about that. So no matter which database you're in, always make sure that you're really paying attention to the top and the sides for additional resources that might be helpful for your project. Now, one thing that's especially, I think, noteworthy about these Gale sources, when you're viewing them in this HTML view, this is fairly unusual, but notice that they actually do have page numbers. Most sources that you read as a web page are not going to have page numbers. This is one of the only places I've ever seen a paginated HTML source, or in other words, a web page with page numbers. So why do they do that? Well, the reason is if we click on this book view at the top here, as I mentioned before, these were all published as books. They are all published as books. We just happen to be looking at the electronic versions of them. So if you wanted to print from this source, or you wanted I think this version is a little bit more reader friendly personally, so I would be reading it from here. And again, if you're looking for what page numbers your quotations come from, say, for example, I think this view might be a little bit easier. And again, Gale offers a lot of tools that are very similar to the other databases. So they give us options for finding our MLA style citation. Notice in this database, we can export it directly to Noodle Tools. We don't even have to mess around with copying and pasting. We could send it right to our Google Drive, or we could download it another way, whatever we prefer. We also, again, have options for downloading, for printing, and for getting a permalink if you would need to use that. So those are kind of the 3 databases that I wanted to demonstrate that I thought might be the most useful for your research projects. But again, you might find other databases that you find useful, and that would be perfectly acceptable. It's completely up to you. So if you have any questions about your sources, or you're having trouble finding sources, please reach out ahead of time to me, to Jacobs Library, to the Writing Center, and we will be very happy to offer you assistance. Finally, if you have any questions about anything that I showed you today within these databases, I would be very happy to answer them. So please feel free to send me an email. Thanks for listening and have a great day. Bye-bye.